So let's talk through the rules for the mightiest and perhaps most ridiculous 40k model in-game. If you happen to see a Warlord Titan looming over the other side of the table, exactly what kind of carnage can you expect its guns to unleash? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're looking at the rules for the 100 wound monstrosity with strength 32 and damage 18 guns that is the Mars pattern Warlord Titan from Forge World. In the video we'll take a look over its datasheet, the crazy enormous damage output of its weapons, and a few thoughts as to enormous titans like this in game. Thank you for the idea for this from the channel's Discord server. Someone suggested it might be fun to do a unit review for it, seeing as I'm giving away one of these for the channel's November giveaway. More on that in just a second if you'd like to be the proud owner of one of these ridiculous resin behemoths. It's fairly common knowledge that the Forge World Warlord Titan is Warhammer 40k's biggest and most expensive model kit. I think for sheer size wise it kind of competes with the Town Manta, which in itself is utterly ridiculous as well. But the scale of this guy is truly different to most other models in the game, standing at over 2 feet tall. Miniature kind of feels like the wrong word for it. I do quite like the way that in the Forge World web store art you can see the little guy on the right hand side there. That's a standard infantry model, standing at around about toe height to this thing. The price of this thing is absolutely ridiculous for any one miniature, £1,600 worth of very valuable resin or $2,500 US. Realistically, that's kind of out of the scope of most hobbyists, going to be much more of a thing for dedicated collectors who want one of these as a display piece. Compared with most other miniatures in the game, it's unlikely you'd use it quite enough to get your value's worth out of it compared with buying other minis. I must admit though, I do always quite like the way that these statement pieces exist from Games Workshop and Forge World. Always kind of cool when I went to Warhammer World when I was younger, just seeing a whole load of vast crazy things out there that I'd probably never get for myself, but maybe had a bit of depth and backdrop to the entire 40k setting, knowing that some people might have some of these behemoths lurking in their collection. The model itself is a vast resin one from Forge World, definitely one for slightly more experienced modelers. The body of the thing is over £1,000 just in itself, and then you buy the weapon systems in separately, with a choice of apocalypse launchers or laser blasters on the top weapons, a few selections for the arm-mounted guns, and then the head and heraldry separately as well. It's kind of fun that the more knight-size Adeptus Titanicus one exists as well. I guess you could always proxy that into the 40k rules in-game and just say that it's very far away or it's shrunk in the wash or something. In any case, as I mentioned last week on the channel update video, I've decided that the channel's November giveaway is going to be the very biggest and most ambitious one I've ever done on Auspex Tactics. I've saved up a little bit of giveaway budget over the last few months and pulled it all together into one big enormous Titan. So I'm going to be ordering one of these monstrous resin machines from Forge World and shipping it out to one of you guys. As it's one that's customizable, I'll hold off ordering it till the person has actually been selected, and then they can choose their choice of the different top guns and arm weapons to ensure that you get your favourite flavour of ridiculous Titan destruction. As per normal for the channel giveaways, there's 2 equal ways to enter, both of them links down in the video description. Firstly, you can support the channel on Patreon for any amount. That gets you automatic entry into the prize draws each month, and it is what allows me to keep these videos coming quite as regularly as I do. Otherwise, you can enter entirely for free via supporting on social media, subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the Facebook page, and then to actually enter the draw for November, a giveaway post appears on the 1st of November. Respond to that with a photo of any 40k mini or imagery, along with your name and the date handwritten within the same photo, the last bit just to deter Facebook bots and spammers. That post is active for 24 hours, and then I do the draw between that and the Patreon entries, putting everything into a random number generator and selecting out one winner to get in touch to how I can post a Warlord Titan to them. I'll announce the results on the channel update video on or around the 4th of November, and I'll post the Titan on its way once I receive it from Forge World. Feel free to check out the links in the video description down below if you'd like to enter either with Patreon or Facebook. Moving on to its absolutely ridiculous stats in Warhammer 40k rules though. In 9th edition the Warlord Titan I believe was around 6,000 points, now Games Workshop have reduced it down to actually a far more manageable 3,500 points. It does seem in 10th edition they have made a bit of an effort to try and make even some of the really biggest stuff at least somewhat balanced with smaller stuff by raw numbers. With the Titan Legion Allies rules it means that you can include one Titan model alongside a Chaos or Imperial force. Though realistically I feel like whenever you're putting models like this on the table, you're venturing into really big games with crazy numbers on both sides. And when you get to that kind of level, you're probably using some level of house rules or your own sort of army construction type rules. Games that are far more about the spectacle and having enormous god machines taking and receiving blows, as opposed to some sort of competitive, tactical, highly optimised 2,000 point game. As you'd expect for a 3,500 point single model, its stat line and weapon profiles are truly ridiculous. The Warlord Titan is toughness 16, so that's the highest toughness in the game there, I believe. Lots of dedicated anti-tank things like las cannons and vindicators with strength 14 will be wounding it on a 5+, and then to back that up it's got a casual 100 wounds with a 2+ armor save with a 5+ invulnerable against ranged attacks. The ranged attacks invulnerable save seems to be their new version of how to represent its void shields. Definitely pretty crazily intimidating there. It also has an OC of 30, so if you had a Warlord Titan with 1 foot on an objective, then your opponent's not getting rid of it very easily. Though its other stats are maybe a little bit more tame than I might have expected, only a 10-inch move as it is fairly slow and lumbering. Kind of weird that with the new towering type rules it won't actually see over line of sight obscuring terrain, which I think would lead to some fairly ridiculous imagery on the board, where you can see over a tiny ruin to see the entire enemy's army in reality, but the obscuring rules could actually get in its way. With such an enormous model, terrain will definitely get in the way of it a bit as well, but I guess if you're playing some big apocalypse style games, then you're probably going to be setting up terrain to accommodate any of these big critters like titans and other gargantuan things on the other side. It is only leadership 6 as well, perhaps a little bit less than I might have guessed for a god machine. Seems that you can shake this quite easily if you do some serious damage to it. Just for interest, I thought it would be fun to see what would happen if you just fired las cannons at it, and it looks like by average numbers it takes you around 100 las cannon hits to bring one of these guys down after rolling to wound and saves. For comparison, that will put it a little bit less durable than something like a Lehman Russ Demolisher point for point. For a 200 point fairly threatening Lehman Russ, that'd be 114 hits to kill the same amount of points of tank. Though at least compared with Games Workshop in the past, that's perhaps surprisingly well balanced versus medium-sized armour. I feel like in the past they've generally made the Titans very underpowered for the points cost and just charged ridiculous values for them. I feel like that might start to break down though when you start to get to things that are greater than strength 16, which you are kind of likely to see in apocalypse style games. Any very big anti-tank weapons like that are going to be disproportionately good against that, when the slight overkill strength just isn't really all that worth it against more conventional armour. In reality it's almost always going to get a cover save as well, unless it's completely right out in the open. With such an enormous profile, you're probably going to be able to nose at least some of it behind cover, and that could make quite a big deal against ranged attacks with its 2+ armour. Before getting into its ranged options, it does have some interesting melee. Again, its standard stomp attacks are perhaps surprisingly tame for a 100 wound god machine. The Warlord feat just get you 6 attacks hitting on a 4+, a strength 12, AP 2 and damage 4. You could maybe expect something like one squash Terminator with that kind of rules, or probably getting 1 or 2 failed saves against an enemy vehicle, not going to be too catastrophic for it despite the size of those ridiculous feet. I feel like that kind of profile might be kind of fine with it, but perhaps should have had a greater damage characteristic. It's kind of hard to imagine something like a Space Marine Rhino tank being trodden on by a Warlord Titan and somehow only sustaining some sort of medium damage from it. The other option though, if you want to punch some enemy Titans in the face, is the Ariok Power Claw. This one's got a kind of hilarious stat on the strike profile, 6 attacks hitting on a 4+, at strength 20, AP -4, and a hilarious damage 24. I quite like the way that a failed save from that thing will casually off something like an Imperial Knight in one hit, and if you divide attacks, theoretically kills 2 per round on average. It is still perhaps surprisingly tame against infantry though, only hitting on a 4+, strength 12, AP 3 and damage 8, means that you're probably killing realistically only 5 infantry, and potentially halving that if they have a 4+ invulnerable or something. I think it definitely gets cool points, though in reality might just not be quite as useful as having another one of its ridiculously enormous guns, which you don't have to get into combat to use. I feel like if the opponent can't screen something like a Warlord Titan, then they basically can't really screen anything. I feel like you just might have an Ariok Power Claw that really wants to get its hands on an enemy Titan, but can't do it because there's some infantry in the way or something. That brings us on to its ranged weapons, and it basically has 3 sets of them. A few smaller point defense type guns, its top-mounted carapace weapons, and then its primary armament arm weapons. The point defense type guns definitely help out a bit. It's got 2 Ardex Defensor Maulers, which are sort of like the profile of an Avenger Gatling cannon for Imperial or Chaos Knights, but only 6 shots rather than 12. Definitely not bad to chew up a few Space Marines, and the defense las cannons are just single shots. Getting on to far more serious stuff though, next up we've got the choice of top weapons, and that's either a pair of Apocalypse launchers or a pair of laser blasters. The Apocalypse launchers are barrage weapons with a great big 200-inch range, so you're probably going to be in range of stuff on the next table with that, I guess. 20 shots each at strength 8, AP -2 and damage 2. Sort of feels like each one is basically 3 Space Marine whirlwinds kind of tied together. As it goes, that really is quite a lot of indirect fire. And while I feel you're probably getting less value of damage out of it, it could be certainly very helpful to have those on an Apocalypse style board. Just means that you can put some absolute pinpoint hurt on the enemy infantry that are most annoying you on the board. I feel like you'd most want to use them to smash enemies on objectives or kill some absolutely dangerous enemy elites that are very easy to kill but are hiding out of line of sight of most of the threats. With the indirect penalty, I guess you'd be dropping an average of 20 hits at Strength 8, AP 1 and Damage 2 on. Could be enough to ruin a standard Space Marine squad, or you could just fire them direct if the infantry did happen to be within your line of sight, I suppose. I feel like for raw value though, they're probably going to struggle to outcompete the laser blasters. These are pretty crazy anti-tank weapons. Each one has a flat 6 shots, but rather curiously still has the blast keyword, so you could get more shots against heavy infantry and things. Hitting on a 3+ at a big strength 16, AP 4, and damage D6 plus 3. They feel very similar in profile to stat lines like the Repulsor Executioner or the Gladiator Lancer, the difference being of course that you get 6 shots rather than 3, and it averages out that against most vehicles without an invulnerable save you'd expect around about 14 wounds against them. Seems like pretty nice ones just to divide fire and try and blast down a few enemy battle tanks of one sort or another, and they'd be pretty solid against super heavies, wounding most of them besides enemy Warlord Titans on a 3+ as well. I think overall I'd be a bit more tempted by the laser blasters if you're playing a big game where you know there's going to be enemy armor on the other side in a big abundance. I just feel like really big models like the Warlord have to kind of go all in on just destroying enemy big heavy threats and hopefully leave the rest of the army to mop up infantry. As if those guns weren't serious enough though, you then have the option of 4 different arm mounted guns, and the choice for each arm is any of these or that Ariok Power Claw. These ones get you the choice between the Bellicosa Volcano Cannon, 120-inch range with D3 plus 3 shots, strength 32, AP minus 5, and a crazy damage 18. That one's really the one if you want to make enemy heavy targets just go away. For enemy hordes or perhaps light vehicles, there's the Macro Gatling Blaster, 100-inch range with 30 shots with sustained hits 1, strength 9, AP 2, and damage 3. Quite a nice profile for chewing up Terminators, I guess. Then there's the Mori Quake Cannon with the even more ridiculous range of 280 inches. This one that gets blast and ignores cover, 3d6 shots at strength 16, AP 4, and damage 6, perhaps somewhat similar to the laser blasters, but with a few more shots on average. And finally there's the enormous plasma cannons that are the Sun Fury Plasma Annihilators, 2d6 plus 6 shots with hazardous, so you have the small chance to take a big 3 mortal wounds on your 100 wound Titan, so overall an average of 13 shots all in all, hitting at strength 12, AP 3, and damage 8 if you overcharge. Perhaps more for entertainment value than anything else, I thought it would be interesting to see which of these weapons does best against a range of targets, and these are the stats and average damage output for just one of these weapons, so I guess you get double the output of these if you took a pair, or have one and the other if you wanted to go for a mix. Again, with the top guns, I feel like the most exciting damage output is from the Volcano Cannon. It's clearly the one that just blasts apart any sort of heavy targets more efficiently than anything else. It's kind of funny that it doesn't matter whether it's firing against a Rhino or a Land Raider, they're all the same to that with its strength 32 and AP 5. You're averaging 50 wounds on each one, though obviously it's going to be really quite swingy and dispensed in batches of 18. It's also by far the best at taking out enemy Titans, as if it were fighting against an enemy Warlord Titan, it'd be wounding on a 2+, which is kind of crazy. There's not a lot of things in 40k that have a strength of 32. Otherwise, as you guessed, the Gatling Blaster does massively better against anything infantry. 30 shots and sustained hits and good damage are particularly nice against Terminators, usually killing around about 8 of them or so, and that could be quite useful in Apocalypse type games. I feel like it's kind of impressive in that it's not really all that bad against heavier targets as well. It should still have a good chance of destroying most normal sized battle tanks in a single round of shooting, though it isn't going to do as much against heavier things like Land Raiders or enemy Titans. The Quake Cannon and the Plasma Annihilator are kind of a halfway house. Even though they don't really have the best numbers compared with the Volcano Cannon, they should still be able to average a dead mainline battle tank in one round of shooting, whether it's a Rhino or a Land Raider. And admittedly, they do significantly better against the Terminator targets, so if you run out of really big things to target, then they will do better than the Volcano Cannon, I suppose. They're not really any better than the Gatling Cannon against enemy Titan class targets, though. The Volcano Lance definitely wins out straight away versus things like an enemy Titan. Overall, for actual all-round usability, I feel like Games Workshop have actually balanced these surprisingly well for an enormous god machine. I'd probably be tempted to take at least one Volcano Lance just to be the last word in dealing with enemy armor, and then maybe pair that with one of the rest that's a little bit more well-rounded and can do some okay damage to infantry as well as just single models. Depends on whether you want to be really good against enemy infantry, or still be able to comfortably one-shot something like a Land Raider most of the time. Finally, for the Titan special rules, a few of them are quite amusing as well. It's got a deadly demise of 2d6 plus 6, so if this does go down and it rolls that 6, then it's going to have a pretty spectacular explosion. Definitely the sort of thing that if it goes nuclear in the midst of your army, you are going to be taking a whole ton of casualties. Just an average of 30 mortal wounds on it. Anything within 6 inches of that enormous profile is going to leave a bit of a hole in the troops. Its Striding Colossus special rule means that you need to spend 4 times the command points each time you target the Warlord Titan with a stratagem. Basically means that you're just not going to be using command points on this under normal circumstances. And even then it might be a bit questionable whether it's really worth 4 CP to even re-roll something like the wound roll of a volcano cannon, even with the crazy potential damage. Finally, I do kind of like the supporting rule that is Wrath of the Omnissiah, which just feels kind of cute. You'd expect something pretty devastating for the special rule of a Warlord Titan, but this one's just literally hand out 1 battle shock test to 1 enemy unit hit by a gun from the Warlord Titan. No minuses to the modifier or anything like that, just literally makes 1 unit shot by it a little bit nervous, in the same way as something like a Space Marine Whirlwind would. For the most part, kind of useless in a big ally game unless you're playing alongside some Chaos Knights and it could amp up their damage or something. It just feels kind of hilariously tacked on to me rather than trying to do something that actually influences the way that it plays. So overall, the Warlord Titan's got a pretty crazy stat line, obviously a ridiculous centerpiece model that's not meant for normal Warhammer 40k games or any sort of massive high-minded strategy, but I do feel like it's fun that they make some actual rules for it, and just to see how they handle the crazy upper end of the Warhammer 40k spectrum, where you've got a model that's just ridiculously bigger than a normal infantry model in-game. I think if you actually wanted to get best value out of it in some sort of crazy big apocalypse game, I feel like going heavy on the tank busting weapons and just going after every single big target that your opponent can field would be quite good. I guess ensuring that you've got good line of sight to and from it if you are playing with Games Workshop's obscuring rules, which now still affect towering models, including this guy. I can't help but think that a few people might just house rule that the Titans can see over buildings and things. If it's kind of clear from model perspectives, they just should be able to. I guess if it does look like your opponent's not got enough anti-tank weapons to bring one of these down, you could maybe stomp it forward towards a midfield objective and put that crazy OC-30 on it. It might not actually matter too much if it gets taken down towards the very end of the game, and hopefully force your opponent to draw loads of fire to it maybe. I'd certainly be interested to hear if any of you guys have cracked out the datasheet for the Warlord Titan in 10th edition so far, and how it performed on the battlefield. Did it manage to lay waste to the enemy army, or was it gone down turn 1 by a whole ton of anti-tank fire focused down? In any case, hope you've enjoyed the video, and as mentioned, feel free to check out the links in the video description if you'd like to win one of these bad boys, either the Patreon page or the Facebook page on the 1st of November. Should be fun to hopefully give one random hobbyist the single biggest and most expensive model in Warhammer 40k. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, while certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new things just about every day, including plenty more unit reviews like this, usually of a bit more of a normal size model scale. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.